In this video, we'll talk about three things. We'll talk about modularity, we'll talk about anatomy, and we'll talk about overall design. For those of you who follow the Ninjago series in the Lego toy line, you'll know that every year they're making more and more detailed and advanced mechs. What is a mech? A mech is pretty much a giant robot where you have the anatomy of a humanoid, and then depending on the design, that mech can be piloted by a minifig, or in the more recent cases, such as Lloyd's Ultimate Combining Mech, you would have vehicles that comes together to form a giant robot, where one person or a few people can sit in those components piloting the mech. Today we'll talk about that. What you see in front of you is two sets from the Polybag series. We have Valkyrie Attack, and we also have Lloyd's Dragon-powered vehicles. You'll probably recognize some of these pieces from both of those Polybag sets because of the color and the pieces that you see in front of you. Unlike the other videos I have, I'm going to work backwards today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what has been built, such as this race car in front of you, and I'm going to explain to you the thought process behind why this was built this way. What you'll see in the end of this series is this vehicle is one of several other vehicles that will combine to form a giant mecha. And more importantly, you'll see how stable it is due to the way it is designed. And last but not least, you'll see why certain builds needs to be designed a certain way so it mimics the human anatomy, such as the joints, the head, and the other parts where you would want to have play features. So let's talk about the vehicle itself. As you can see, this vehicle it rolls on the ground using these four wheels included in the Lloyd's Dragon-powered vehicle Polybag. The clearance is low, but there's sufficient space beneath the vehicle for it to roll. The other thing you'll notice is that there's only like 4 studs in construction. Unlike the more modern vehicles where there's at least minimum of 6 studs across, there's only 4 studs. And part of the reason is because due to the limited pieces provided by the Polybags, it's better to keep it simple than have it bulky and not having the right pieces to snap everything together and have it stable. There you'll notice that there's some spaces in between, such as this cabin, the driver's cabin. And you'll notice that unlike most full-size Lego vehicles, you only have a 2x1 plate space right here. So the intent is that if you do have a Ninjago figure, you can take the leg off from the torso and fit the top part of the minifig into the spot. Now, I would not include this in this video because these two Polybag sets do not come with a minifig. But in future video, you'll see how that works. And finally, you'll notice that there are several points in this construction where it kind of reminds you of a race car, but it doesn't. And I'll give you an example. In front of the race car here, instead of a bumper or an air dam, you have a claw. And there's going to be a reason why that is later. You'll also notice that the spoiler, unlike the previous build, is a rather simple parallelogram shape, where it doesn't really look like a spoiler, but it does invoke the shape of a spoiler. And I'll explain why that is later. I'll show you the bottom of this build. You'll see that on the bottom, it's not constructed of just your standard 2x6 or 2x8 plate. Rather, there's a discontinuous piece where you can see there's 2 joints or 2 plates here where it consists of a clip and a bar piece. I'll show you why that is later. So let's go into the construction itself. Normally when you have a vehicle, you would have to make it so that it would look like what you're building. You would have a more or less unified color scheme, and more importantly, that it is functional. Meaning that if you have a race car, you expect it to roll. If you have an airplane, you would expect it to have wings. You would expect it to have a tail and a propeller or some sort of propulsion. Boat's the same thing. You would expect it to have some sort of like hydrodynamic shape to it, like a keel, maybe some sails, and probably like some sort of like form of propulsion, very much like an airplane, like say an outboard motor or even sails. In this case, this is what I've done with the race car. Now, what makes this different? Because this is meant to be a part of a larger set, a larger mecha, I have to make some sacrifices. Again, going back to the front, you'll notice there's a clip instead of a bumper or some sort of air dam. And that's because this is where the knee joint is going to be, or the thigh joint is going to be. Same thing with what I said about the spoiler. You'll notice that the spoiler is in an odd shape, and the reason why that is because it needs a big enough surface, so when I tilt it up this way, it stands by itself, like so. So that it'll be stable enough to support the other vehicles that's going to form the other parts of this body. What you also have to remind yourself is, if this is a leg component, what does a leg need? It needs to be able to bend. So you'll see that what I shown earlier, where there's two clip pieces and two bar pieces, this would facilitate the bending of the knee joint. It looks like the car crashes, but at the same time, there's a purpose to why this is built this way, so that when you do have it in mecha form, you'll be able to bend the knee, okay? So I'll take this apart and show you that for the hip joint or the thigh joint, you can clip it on, like just pretend this is like the upper body. So this bumper part where the clip is, it will serve as that joint there. You'll see this theme occur throughout this series where I'm going to show you the other vehicles. You're probably wondering, is this how you build the arm? Yes. But at the same time, there are some subtle differences to the arm where you have to make sure that the arm has enough articulation for it to be a practical joint. I'll give you an example. For a hip joint, you may not necessarily need a ball, like a rotator joint, because of stability requirements. Say, for example, if you do not have enough pieces where it offers a stiff ratchet for the hip, it will not stand up and you cannot pose the mecha. Whereas if you have an arm, you don't necessarily need the stability, but more specifically, you need the articulation required to make the arm a playable feature. So I'm going to break this down to the components that forms this vehicle. So here's the spoiler, and I'll separate these two. So you have the front part of the vehicle and the back part of the vehicle. I'll talk about the front first. So for the front, for it to look or even resemble a race car, you want it to have that aerodynamic shape, that wedge in the front of the car. So what I did was I took the slope pieces from the Valkyrie Attack vehicle and the pieces that you find in Lloyd's Dragon Power vehicle and formed the front part. So this resembles the front of a F1 racer, a Formula 1 racer. Same thing with the cockpit area or the driver cabin area. I took the pieces that were available in the Valkyrie Attack polybag and formed the front part of the cabin, the cockpit. The bottom part, I did something a little different. I put the clip there just because there was only one of these red pieces in the Valkyrie Attack polybag. I decided to just add it in, just to kind of tell me that, okay, this belongs to the left leg. Because when you flip it over, right, and you put it onto the mecha piece, this open piece will remind me this is where I want it on the exterior, so that you don't see this part on the outside when you attach it to the mecha body. And last but not least, I took these clips from the Lloyd Dragon Power vehicles because these would fit onto the clips that's also from the same polybag set. Now, why does this work? It's because these clips, when they're clipped onto these bars has a slightly higher plastic diameter compared to the other pieces, so that it'll give it that friction needed for it to have that articulation and not be floppy and loose. So as you can see, when I bring this down, this doesn't droop down. It has enough friction for it to stay put, so that when you do pose your mecha, or you do want to put it in a pose where some of the weight goes onto it, it will more or less support it depending on the angle and the weight distributed on the top. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you how I built this. With the front, I'm going to stick with the front for now. This is what I've done. So I mentioned how I took the pieces available from each polybag and kind of built on top of it. So this is what I have. It's a very simple construction using simple pieces, like so. So that's the component piece. So again, the logic behind that is when I build this, you want it so that you can adequately put all the pieces in there and still have enough weight, you have enough stability, and more importantly, it would be enough so that when you have it in the vehicle form, you would be able to use it as a standalone set. So what I've done was, I understand that I need the hip joint to connect this overall component onto the torso component, which I would have later. And then I add the wheels, like so. Okay. And then I add these clip pieces, like this. And then I added these white 1x3 plates onto the back. So I added this here to give it a shape. Then I did the same thing with this, but then before I do that, put this on. Okay, put these pieces on a sideboard like this. Put this right there. Make sure it snaps in place. Put these curved pieces on a side, like so. And put this last slope piece right here. And then again, what I did was I just added this small slope, just kind of remind me which way goes on the outside. And then of course, this will attach back to this back half once it's put back properly. So that's the front part. Now we'll go to the back part. So the back, for the race car, again, very simple. You need to have wheels. And of course, for this Formula Racer, you want something to attach the spoiler to. So I took one of the clips, again, from Lloyd's Dragon Power vehicles, to make sure that it does attach to the back, to this piece here, which I'll get in a second. I built a very rudimentary engine in the back, with a little gas cap in the front. Of course, I have a little roll, kind of like a roll bar in the back of the vehicle. So when you attach it, like so, it has that protection for the driver. So again, I'm gonna move backwards and show you why this is built this way. So I'm gonna take this apart first. Take this out. Take this out. Remove these pieces. Take apart these pieces. Like so. And then take the wheels out. And then take the bar pieces out. You know, for this, I'm just gonna leave it as is because this is a very basic construction. You just have a 1x3 jumper piece attaching these two eyeballs from the Valkyrie attack set onto a rounded 1x2 plate. Same thing here. I got a 1x3 jumper piece. I have some 1x1 circular tiles that I attach on, 1x1 circular studs, the transparent pieces. And then I have like a curved piece for a 1x2 jumper, which forms the gas cap. So I'm gonna put this back together. I'm gonna take this base plate, put the wheels back like this, like so. Then take these two golden bar pieces, put it back like this. I'm gonna stabilize this back part, because right now these are hanging down, right? So you want to stabilize them. This red piece, like that. Then you want to put the clip on like this, so it stays put. And then what you want to do is, and this is important, I'm going to put this on. And the reason for that is, when you snap this to the front like this, you see what it's doing there? It's kind of like acting as a stop. Well, actually, I should put this the other way because that's how it was, like that. Because it's a knee joint, you don't want it to bend forward. You want it to be just bending backwards like this. So you want to keep it so that it acts as a stop when it's in leg mode, in the leg component mode. Okay, continue on with the construction. You take these rounded 1x2 plates. Now keep in mind, this is not the knee joint. This is for the spoiler slash foot. And then you put this on, these rounded 1x3 pieces, like so. Okay. Then you put on the rear, the roll bar section, like that. And you put the gas cap right here. Then put back these jumper pieces where the engine is. So that's how it's built. During the design of this, you have to remember that if this is going to support weight, this would have to be stable. This is fairly reinforced and is pretty compact so that if there is weight put on it, it won't blow up on you. And the design allows it to be articulated both on a knee joint and on a foot. Okay, the foot itself is very simple. It's a spoiler build. It's a spoiler made to do double duty as a foot. This is a mixture of the pieces from the Valkyrie Attack set, Polybag set, and Lloyd's mech again. Or sorry, Lloyd's Dragon Power vehicles. So it's a simple 4-piece construction. You take this piece, the one in the bar at the end here, and this is important because this is going to attach to the foot, the ankle area. And from the ankle area, you got to make sure that when it folds, it's stable. So I took that out, put this 2x3 tile, put it here, and then take these 2x2 wing pieces, snap it on here. And then after you're done that, you snap it on the back like this. And just to test it, to make sure that the foot, the foot mode works, you just bend it at 90 degrees. Now, why did I use a tile? Why did I use a 2x3 tile, not a 2x3 plate? As you can see, when it bends like this at a 90-degree angle, if this is a plate instead of a tile, which it is right now, the studs would push this up like that. And it doesn't look like much right now, but if you have more weight on top of this, the mecha would need to either do one or two things. You would need to have a heel spur right here to make this stable, or the top would have to lean forward like this. So it kind of looks like a horse or some other animal where the legs are kind of bowed out for it to be stable. Now this would just give you a center of gravity kind of like, stay in one straight line instead of in an arc. So this is the reason why I designed the vehicle this way. You'll notice 3 things right now. You'll notice that number 1, the vehicle you can stand by itself with or without the other components. And of course, the reason for this is because you need the stability for supporting the weight that's on top, not just the body, but also the arms and the head. Second, you'll notice a slim profile to this. This is a matter of choice, a matter of taste. If this is a 6-stud vehicle, like a 6-stud wide vehicle, you will have to make it so that your torso is also wider in order for it to have the space in between, to have the legs to be articulated. This isn't a problem per se, but if you make the legs bigger, your torso are going to be bigger. And when your torso are going to be bigger, your arms would have to be bigger as well to make it proportionate. This can be potentially a problem because when you make things bigger on top, you would have to take into account that there's more pieces, and of course the pieces makes the upper body heavier. If the upper body is heavier, you would have to make your joints stiffer, more tight. You have to make sure that the amount of bricks you use would be sufficient to support the weight. And more importantly, if you are to add pieces onto the vehicle, you would have to design it so that it looks like a vehicle, not something that's really, chunky and stubby so that it doesn't look sleek and speedy. So in this case, I kept it slender so that the top parts would be smaller and lighter. Finally, you'll also notice that because of the fact that this is one component of a vehicle, it has to kind of represent what it does in the overall set. So say for instance, if I were to make a vehicle and I'm going to make another leg, I can always make another Formula 1 racer. But in this case, because it's a slim, very nondescript vehicle, I can always make this into an ordinary race car. I can make it into a boat, anything that would have a similar profile to it. So when you look at how, if I just take this apart, right, and if I take out the wheels, I put this back, right, I would have to do very little to make this look like an airplane nose cone and have a cockpit in the back. Whereas in the back, because this is more or less designed as a race car, I cannot reuse this. But in this case, I can always reuse this design using the same anatomical requirements for the knee and the hip. You can always repurpose this design into something different. When you make a design, see if you can make it so that in case you had to build something similar to it that would serve a similar function, make it so that you don't have to tweak a lot of it, especially if your piece count is limited, like the poly bags that you buy at Dollarama. This would allow you more options further on. Now, this is also advantageous if you're building the other limbs, like the arms and whatnot, because this is a very simple design where you can translate it to other vehicles and to other limbs as well. In a way, if you want to really get ahead of yourself, you can always make this part just the way it is. But if you're going to make like other pieces, you can make this into a dragster, because you have the back component where you have a large engine, but all you need is just a longer front for it to be a completely different vehicle. And that can also be a leg component if you tweak it or engineer it so that the nose part or the front part of the dragster also folds down and exposes this hinge. Now, what you also want to do is when you build this, take into account of weight. And I mentioned this several times in this video. It's because Lego, despite the fact that you have these joints using friction to keep them in place, they can only support so much weight. I'll give you an example. I'm going to stand this up. So right now, assuming the table is, it's balanced and whatnot, like when you build yours, it's balanced. You can only have so much weight before it goes backwards or forward, depending on how stiff the joint is. So because this is at a 90 degree, this is fairly stable. But if your weight for the torso, for the upper body is heavy, it'll start leaning backwards. So when you design your upper body, try to make it so that the weight is on the front of the mecha, not in the back. And when you articulate the arms, same thing. You want to make sure that the arms are sticking straight through and not onto the side as much. And the weight is always lower so that it doesn't cause a higher center of gravity where this entire mecha can just tip backwards. Finally, I do want to address one more thing. And this is important. For a mecha to be successfully aesthetically pleasing, make it so that your color scheme is very basic. As you recall, in the past sets where these polybag pieces are gleaned from, Valkyrie Attack, that polybag has a lot of colors. You have red, yellow, white, gray, you have black pieces. It's pretty much all over. Whereas Lloyd's Dragon Power vehicles, it's very straightforward. You have teal, white, gray. Now what I did was I try to use the pieces that would mesh together, yet not be too garish, and it's easy to replicate in the other components. So you'll see that in the other components in the future videos, I will have a very similar color scheme. So in this case, you'll see that white is the base color, the background color along with the black tires and a gray base. But you also see that I'll use a splash of red and light blue or teal just to give it that pop of color. It also reminds you, of certain flags with a similar color scheme. Last but not least, I keep the yellow with minimal pieces so that it doesn't make everything clash. So in this case, I made a vehicle that's number one, simple, number two, streamlined, and number three, unifying color scheme. So in the future videos, you'll see that I'm going to have the same principles applied to those vehicles, plus the fact that the color scheme and the joint engineering would be very similar to this. If you like what you watched here today, hit like and subscribe to this channel. We'll see you in the future video, and you can look forward to the second part of this video. Thank you.